Actress Shelley Duvall has passed away. Duvall died of complications from diabetes at her home in Texas.
When Shelley Duvall passed away in July 2024 at the age of 75, the world not only lost a talented actress, but also one of Hollywood's most misunderstood stars. For decades, she was remembered mostly for her role as Wendy Torrance in The Shining, where her performance left an unforgettable mark on film history. But what many people never knew was the truth behind her experience on that film set and how it shaped the rest of her life. At 74, in one of her final interviews, Shelley finally broke her silence about Stanley Kubrick and revealed things she had kept private for over 4 decades. For years, fans believed she was abused and mistreated by Kubrick, and the stories about 127 takes, clumps of hair falling out, and days of endless crying added to the myth that her suffering was forced upon her by a cruel director. While some of that was true, she did cry for hours. She did lose hair from stress, and she did feel pushed to her limits. Her own version of events was far more complex. She admitted that the film took everything from her, but she also said that Kubrick was not her enemy. In fact, she described him as warm, thoughtful, and even loving in his own way. The secret that shocked fans was not that Kubrick broke her spirit, but that she considered him her greatest teacher. This twist in her story, revealed so late in her life, showed the world a different side of both Duvall and Kubrick. To understand why her words mattered so much, we have to go back to the beginning, to the little girl from Texas who never dreamed of becoming an actress but who ended up in one of the most iconic horror films of all time. Shelley Alexis Duvall was born on July 7, 1949, in Fort Worth, Texas. She was the eldest child of Bobby Ruth Crawford, who worked in real estate, and Robert Richardson Duvall, a man who shifted from being a cattle auctioneer to becoming a lawyer. Her family moved often because of her father's unstable work in insurance, and they lived in different towns before finally settling in Houston around 1954. Life in the Duvall household was noisy and full of energy, especially because Shelley had 3 younger brothers, Scott, Shane, and Stuart. Growing up as the only girl, she quickly learned to be tough and independent. She was nicknamed Manic Mouse by her mother because she never sat still, always running around and knocking things over. From an early age, Shelley was curious and creative, even though her parents weren't involved in the arts. At 6, she loved drawing insects in the grass, sometimes sketching dozens of them at once. She also made her own homemade lip gloss, which she called the pink stuff, and sold it door-to-door in her neighborhood. By the time she reached high school, she was known as a smart but unusual student. She excelled in science and dreamed of becoming a researcher. But she also spent hours reading fairy tales and stories like The Wizard of Oz. These small passions would shape her future more than she could have ever imagined. In 1967, she graduated from Waltrip High School and enrolled at South Texas Junior College to study nutrition and diet therapy. But when she witnessed a shocking laboratory experiment involving the brain of a monkey, she was so disturbed that she left school immediately. That moment pushed her away from science and left her floating without direction, and fate placed her in the path of Hollywood. Shelley's journey into acting was something she never planned. She was working as a cosmetic saleswoman in Houston when a group of young filmmakers spotted her at a party in 1970. She wasn't dressed up for the occasion, yet her tall, slender frame, large expressive eyes, and unique look caught their attention immediately. These filmmakers were part of Robert Altman's crew, and they believed she had the kind of unusual beauty and natural presence that Hollywood rarely saw. At first, Shelley thought it was a joke. She had no acting experience, no formal training, and no interest in pursuing a career in film. But when they insisted and asked her to audition for Altman's upcoming film, Brewster McCloud, 1970, curiosity got the better of her. To her surprise, she got the role, and that single decision changed the rest of her life. Robert Altman became not just her first director, but also her mentor, shaping her into a professional actress through encouragement and trust. Unlike later directors who demanded perfection, Altman gave her freedom to experiment, and Shelley quickly became one of his favorite collaborators. Over the next decade, she worked in several Altman films, including McCabe and Mrs. Miller, 1971, Thieves Like Us, 1974, and Nashville, 1975. Critics began noticing her unusual acting style natural, quirky, and deeply authentic. She wasn't glamorous in the traditional Hollywood sense, but she had something no one else did: vulnerability. This quality made her stand out, and while other actresses chased after glamorous roles, Shelley gravitated toward characters who felt real. By the late 1970s, she was respected as a talented actress, but nothing could have prepared her for the role that would define her life. Wendy Torrance, in The Shining. Paragraph 4, landing The Shining -370 words. When Stanley Kubrick began casting for The Shining, he faced one of the most difficult choices of his career. Who would play Wendy Torrance? The fragile but determined wife of Jack Nicholson's character. Many actresses, including Jessica Lange and Angelica Houston, were considered for the role. But Kubrick wanted someone who looked ordinary, someone the audience could believe as a vulnerable, everyday woman trapped in an extraordinary nightmare. When he saw Shelley Duvall, he knew immediately she was the one. Her large eyes carried a constant sense of fear and sadness, and her voice had a trembling softness that matched Wendy perfectly. Shelley, however, was hesitant. She admired Kubrick, but had heard stories about his demanding style. Still, the chance to work with him was too big to pass up, and she accepted the role. What she didn't know was how much it would take out of her physically, emotionally, and mentally. Kubrick wanted realism above everything else, and he pushed Shelley to a level that many people considered abusive. She had to cry for hours, perform the same scene over 100 times, and endure constant pressure. The most infamous example was the baseball bat scene, where Wendy swings at Jack as he menaces her. That one sequence took 127 takes, making it into the Guinness World Records. Shelley's hair began to fall out from the stress, and she became isolated on set, rarely speaking to anyone. While Nicholson got breaks and encouragement, Shelley often felt alone. Looking back decades later, she admitted that the experience was brutal. But she also revealed something shocking. She didn't hate Kubrick for it. She said he was warm and friendly off camera, and that his tough methods were not cruelty but dedication to the craft. To her, Kubrick wasn't a monster, he was a genius who demanded her best, even if it broke her down in the process for years. The story of Shelley Duvall on The Shining was told as a tragedy. Innocent actress pushed to the brink by a controlling director. Many articles painted her as a victim, and fans often expressed anger toward Kubrick for his treatment of her. Shelley herself, however, carried a more complicated truth. At 74, in her final interviews, she admitted that the experience was both the hardest and the most rewarding of her career. Yes, she cried until her eyes were swollen. Yes, she lost hair and endured exhaustion. But she also felt that Kubrick's relentless approach gave her a performance she could never have reached otherwise. It was tough, she said, but it was worth it. She explained that Kubrick had a unique way of connecting with actors. He knew when to push and when to reassure. Off camera, he was gentle, sometimes even playful, but once the cameras rolled, he demanded absolute perfection. For Shelley, this was not cruelty. It was a form of artistry. She admitted that she sometimes felt like she was in a constant state of fear on set. But that fear translated into Wendy's terror, making her performance unforgettable. The revelation shocked fans who had assumed she resented Kubrick. Instead, she praised him as one of the greatest directors she ever worked with. This confession changed the narrative of The Shining forever. Instead of a story about abuse, it became a story about sacrifice for art. Shelley revealed that she and Kubrick shared mutual respect, even if it came at a high personal cost. Her words reminded people that art is often born out of struggle. And while she suffered for it, she also carried pride in what she accomplished. The secret she revealed was not that Kubrick destroyed her, was that he helped her create something timeless. When The Shining was released in 1980, critics were divided at first. Many praised Jack Nicholson's over-the-top performance, but dismissed Shelley's portrayal as too weak or hysterical. What they didn't realize was that her performance was the result of months of psychological pressure, and the vulnerability they criticized was exactly what Kubrick wanted. Over time, as the film became a horror classic, audiences began to appreciate Shelley's role more deeply. In fact, today her performance is often seen as one of the most realistic depictions of fear ever captured on film. However, the damage had already been done. Shelley felt crushed by the criticism and struggled to land major roles afterward. She continued to work, appearing in films like Time Bandits 1981 and Popeye 1980, where she played Olive Oyl opposite Robin Williams, but Hollywood never seemed to fully value her talent. By the mid-1980s, she shifted her focus toward projects she cared about personally. One of her biggest passions was children's entertainment, and she launched Fairy Tale Theatre, a TV series where celebrities performed in classic fairy tales. The show was successful, earning critical praise and allowing Shelley to express her creativity outside the harsh world of Hollywood. For a while, it seemed like she had found peace, but as the years went on, her appearances on screen became less frequent, and whispers began to spread that she was withdrawing from the public eye. Behind the curtain, Shelley was dealing with private struggles that would haunt her for decades. By the 1990s, Shelley Duvall had all but vanished from Hollywood. She moved back to Texas, far away from the cameras, and lived a quiet life in the countryside. But her retreat from the spotlight fueled rumors. In 2016, her struggles with mental health were put on full display when she appeared on Dr. Phil. The episode was controversial, with many accusing the show of exploiting her vulnerable state. Shelley seemed fragile, speaking about bizarre fears and conspiracies, and it broke the hearts of fans who remembered her as the bright-eyed actress from The Shining. For years, this appearance became the only image people had of her, overshadowing her long career. However, in the years before her death, Shelley slowly began to reclaim her story. In 2022, she returned to acting with a small role in the indie horror film The Forest Hills. While it wasn't a major comeback, it showed her determination to reconnect with her passion. More importantly, she gave interviews where she finally spoke openly about her past. At 74, she wanted the world to know that Stanley Kubrick was not the villain people made him out to be. She admitted that the experience of filming The Shining nearly broke her, but she also said it gave her the performance of her life. Her words reframed decades of misunderstanding and allowed her to take control of her legacy. When Shelley passed away in July 2024, tributes poured in from fans, filmmakers, and actors. Many remembered her not only as Wendy Torrance, but also as a woman who had lived authentically, even when it meant stepping away from fame. The truth she revealed late in life that Kubrick had pushed her. Yes, but never to destroy her, was a reminder of how complicated art, pain, and memory can be. In the end, Shelley Duvall's life was not defined by tragedy, but by resilience. She gave everything to her craft, and through her honesty at 74, she finally found peace in telling the world her side of the story.